EAGLES, Eagles.
And a good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome in to Birds 365 with Zander, Krause, and John McMullen. I'm Joe Krause, sitting in for Zander Krause today on this Thursday, which is actually going to be, Johnny Mac, our Football Friday. No Birds 365 tomorrow in honor, in celebration of what will be a big weekend for your partner, Zander Krause, as Alexander James Krause and Emily DiMarino get married on Saturday. What an event it will be. And there will be no Birds 365 tomorrow, but JAKIB Nation and the Birds 365 community, Johnny Mac, will certainly need to get used to me. I'll be sitting in the hot seat. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Congratulations, obviously, to Zander. I always take setback. We lost an A.J., but we still have an A.J. I didn't know that. You told me that, Joe. So, but congratulations to the happy couple going to Italy as well. So it'll be me and you for a while.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, man, and a couple of the deadest weeks of the season as the players are all on either vacation or hiatus until they actually set training camp and report towards the last week or the end of July is when training camp will get underway. And I guess that's when it'll get real.
Yeah, still don't have an official date, but it'll be late July. And if you look at the start of the season, a little bit later than last year for the calendar. So it'll be a little bit later in July, but 27th, 28th, somewhere around that range. But not official yet. But yeah, that's when they'll get back on the field, and plenty of stuff coming out in between then. Obviously, the latest seems to be the renewed hype around Max Crosby, which is, similar. This is the time of year. Any big player, any big name, the Eagles are interested. Man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for an edge rusher when you have to pay so many people coming up, and you already paid $25 million a year for Jonathan Grenard. So sometimes I think these things are like, well, Howie will figure it out. Well, it's still a capped league, and you got to be realistic at some point.
And that was going to be my question. Is it realistic for the fan base? Is it realistic to even think that a conversation like that regarding Crosby, listen, anything could be figured out, John. I mean, these guys are in a position to make it happen if they want to make it happen. I would assume that to be correct, but is that even a possibility that they could make a move and get Crosby signed despite the big contract and everything else?
Well, and to your point, anything's possible, but you have to move things. You have to move things around. For instance, if you make this move, you almost have to make other moves to make sure it fits and makes sense. So you have to be careful what you wish for, because you're not just adding Max Crosby. For instance, we talk about Jalen Carter, a potential extension. He might have to be out the door. It might be either or. You certainly would be looking to trade an edge rusher potentially back to the Raiders. So that could be somebody like Nolan Smith or Jalix Hunt, depending on what they want. So you can't just say, drop them in. So you would have to almost move mountains to make a move like that. And you also have to. Personally, I think Baltimore had a bit of a buyer's remorse when they traded 2 first-round picks for him, and they rescinded and backed out of the deal. But he does have knee problems as well. It could be as simple as they took the physical and they said, yeah, we can't do this because the knee is too bad. So you have to factor that into it as well. You have to factor age into it. He's only 28, but he's played. This is a guy who basically plays every snap in Las Vegas. So, he's only 28, but he's played 7 seasons and he's always on the field. The snap counts are just enormous with Max Crosby. So I would say he's an old 28 because of that wear and tear. And for people that don't think wear and tear is a real thing, look at Jalen Carter during the Super Bowl season when he led the NFL in snaps for interior defensive linemen, well over 1,000. And look at the guy who came back last season, just beaten up, shoulder pain, persistent shoulder pain to the point they had to shut him down. This guy's been doing that for years, playing that kind of snap count in the NFL. So I wouldn't take it too seriously yet, other than Howie's always going to do his due diligence. But I can't see how it fits just from the money standpoint. I can't see how it fits.
Yeah, you mentioned Jalen Carter, and I wonder, John, whether or not one Jalen Carter is worth the big bag of money that Drew Rosenhaus wants. I wonder if the Eagles are sick of Jalen Carter from the standpoint of, I don't know if it's immaturity. I don't know if it's annex on the field. I just wonder if there's a concern there or an issue there that would lead the Eagles to move on from Carter if the opportunity was right, instead of paying him all that money.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to throw that into the equation because you do have Moro Ojomo, and you could say, well, would you rather have? I've talked about this for a number of weeks. Would you rather have Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, and a first round pick, or just Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, something like that? However, I do not think that this is the time to trade Jalen Carter because he's not at his height as far as what you would get back, because no matter where he goes, you have to sign. If you're the team that's going to acquire Jalen Carter, you got to pay him $35 million a year, plus give up a first round pick with that contract. That's steep. That is really steep. So you have to find somebody who's really bought in on a player who has, although I think it's overstated, has had some maturity issues, and obviously dating back to college, the far larger issue, which was a tragedy that cost people their lives. So, yeah, I mean, it's fair to consider how far you want to go with it. And coming off, look, bottom line is, if you're as talented as Jalen Carter, you're going to get paid in the NFL. That's the 2024. What complicates it is the shoulder problems, the persistent shoulder problems, because he wasn't himself last year. He didn't play like himself last year. And if that's going to be chronic and you're not going to have the same player, that's the question you have to answer. The Eagles already decided way back when they drafted Jalen Carter, we're willing to take the risk because of the talent of the player. They already made that decision. And if anything, I talk about him all the time. I think he's extremely, I think he's extremely polite. He's extremely nice. He's made some mistakes like all young people make. I don't think this is Al Capone. I've said this many times. He's not a bad guy. There's bad guys, and then there's, maybe immature people who make mistakes. That is, I think he was in that category. If anything, he's one of the nicer players I've met over the past few years coming in, as far as just his manners and his ability to relate to people. So I think there's this narrative for people that don't get to see this is a bad guy. This is not a bad guy. But is he healthy? This is the NFL. Can he perform at the level he performed in 2024? None of us are doctors. None of us know that. All we see is the videos posted, working out. He's now lifting weights. He couldn't lift weights last year, so he's getting better. But until you see it, I'd be cautious. I don't blame the Eagles for being cautious, but the problem is you have Drew Rosenhaus on the other side, and they, their belief is, you guys caused this by the amount of time you played him in the run to the Super Bowl. So they're pushing to get the money now, as they should. That's Drew's job. So it's a little bit more difficult than I think people realize.
Was there anything to the story, John, I guess it wasn't, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it was the mandatory minicamp where Jalen Carter was a participant in, call it individual drills, and a non-participant in team drills, and then
it's a holding is what it is. That's the new NFL, because they changed the CBA a couple years ago to the fact that in the old days you could hold out and you get all these fines, and then you would agree to a deal and they would just retroactively erase the fines. That's what used to happen in the old days. So people felt comfortable holding out, understanding those fines were going to go away. You can't do that now. They collectively bargain it in that if you're fined, you're fined. So holdouts have become the hold in. And what the hold in is, you show up, but you don't practice. And that's what happened at mandatory minicamp. He was there, but he was holding in. Now Nick was asked about it, and he said, "Is it the shoulder? Because it could be the shoulder still, or is it the hold in?" And of course, he's not going to talk about it, but you can intimate by the fact that, again, he's been working out in South Jersey. He's posting all these video clips. He's lifting significant weight. He could have participated, at least limited. So again, you're only playing the odds are, but it strikes me as more of a hold in than injury related.
And just so I understand the dynamic of how that works, you cover the team, I don't. How does that work? When Jalen Carter decides that he's going to hold in and he's going to be there, does he say, "Hey, coach, I'm not running any team drills today. I'm here, but I'm not here"? Or does he how does it work? Like, are the coaches do they know it's an active hold in, or do they not know and they're kind of...
Oh, yeah, they know.
Yeah.
They know. I mean, that's you let your agent play the bad guy. So it's true. We'll say, yeah, well, he's going to be there, but we're not going to allow him to do anything. Everybody knows. I mean, it's part of the industry. So, yeah, I mean, the coaches are not involved from the standpoint of the contract stuff. From their perspective, there is, you coach the guys who are available to you. And from their perspective, it's simply he's not available for these 2 days. But it's not rare.
Does that carry into... Does a hold in potentially carry into camp when the team reports in July?
Yeah, it could. A lot of people think he was holding in last year, but it was an injury. And he wasn't eligible. So I think a lot of people don't understand he wasn't eligible last year. So he was injured last year, but people ran with that speculation. Again, who didn't know he wasn't eligible for an extension yet. This time he's eligible for an extension. So, as a player, you have a very limited time to make a lot of money. So I never blame players because teams will cut you at the drop of a hat if you don't reach a certain performance level. So I never blame them for trying to get as much as they can when they can, but you only have a limited amount of leverage. And basically, because he's under contract to the Eagles for, once they extended the 5th-year option, it's 2 more years. So there's only a certain amount of leverage he has. And one of that is the hold in. Now, you can do it for a week or so, but at some point, if the Eagles want to hold strong, he's not going to hold out games and he's not going to lose money from that perspective. So, there's only a limited amount of leverage that you have. And that's one of the things he could do. So, if the Eagles don't,
what's the end game then, John? I mean, if Jalen Carter now is eligible and the Eagles are not ready, and I guess I'm assuming this, but if the Eagles are not ready to get a deal done with his agent, what's the end game for the hold-in? Is it
you could
go away, or does Rosenhaus dig in as you get deeper into camp? He won't be the first player to hold out. I'm not saying he would be or he will, but what's the end game? If you start a process, what's the end game?
Well, the end game is an extension. If you don't get the extension, then you start talking about trades, request a trade potentially. Or, eventually, bottom line is if the Eagles want to hold the line, they can hold the line and he can either play for the Eagles or not play. So again, there's a limited amount of leverage, but I always use the Mike Tomlin quote. I love it because and you just saw it with A.J. Brown. And Mike says you want volunteers, not hostages. So if you have unhappy players in the locker room, bad things tend to happen. So you can request a trade. We just talked about it. If you want to bring in Max Crosby, well, you're opening up a lot of money by wiping Jalen Carter off the books, understanding you don't have to pay him in the future. So,
well, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if that's the piece of the puzzle or or part of the process where, let's just assume for a moment that the interest in getting Crosby is more real than we think it is, for lack of a better description. So now Howie's interested. He wants to get Crosby's the difference maker. Fangio's knocking on his door. Let's get this guy. Let's get this guy. Let's get this guy. So in order to do that, we've got to free up money. And the way to do that is to move on from Jalen Carter. And that gives you the gateway to add Crosby, and I guess pick up what is the remaining few years on his contract through 28 or 29, whatever it is. And then it becomes Jalen Carter is the guy that departs and goes elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely, but
I mean, could you trade Jalen Carter straight up for Max Crosby?
It depends where the Raiders are. Obviously, do they want to defend? Like a lot of people said, why didn't they go get Myles Garrett? Well, the Browns didn't want a defensive tackle. They wanted an edge rusher. And they specifically wanted Jared Verse, and they didn't want a defensive tackle. So, I mean, the assumption that you just want a player might not be a fit. I don't think it's real by any stretch of the imagination, but from the standpoint of leverage, asking for a trade is part of the leverage a player can have. And if you're not going to give him an extension and he wants an extension, that could be a possibility that they ask for a trade. Now, the Eagles can say no. Again, he's under contract through 2027 at a cost-effective rate. But again, that you bring up, do you want an unhappy player in the locker room? It's why Howie's job is tough.
Maybe that's why Nick's job is harder than people think.
Well, it's definitely harder than people think.
Yeah, he's got to manage. He's got to be able to manage public perception, manage the internal process
and expectations,
and find ways to make the talent that's on the roster that he's been given by his GM effective enough to dominate and win. That's how you would define a head coach in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, I always use it. I've been using the offseason as an example. There's so much uncharted territory in the NFL. And by that, I mean, like if you ask the average fan, they think it's all about, well, Nick doesn't call plays. So what does Nick do? I'm like, so to use an example, the Eagles were on the field phase 2 and phase 3. The Eagles were on the field 16 times during the spring. The media, we got to see 4 of those times. So I'm not a mathematician, but that's 25%. 75% we didn't see. It's uncharted. Nobody saw what was going on. The far more important than when you see the product, all the average fan sees the product on Sunday or Saturday or Friday because they play every day now, but you get the point. They see the finished product. 90% of it or more is the preparation during the week. And as far as Nick's job, yeah, I mean, there's so much to it that people don't see. It's like the ocean. They say, 15% of the ocean has been explored. The other 85, we don't know what's going on.
No, I just know we'll never run out of water. When you got 85% of the ocean still out there, somehow we'll find a way, if we need the water, to figure out how to use the water.
You can't look at it. You can't explore it. So I use that analogy all the time. So there's so much that people don't see, so they don't think about it. And yeah, managing personalities is a huge. When I covered the NBA, I used to say Larry Brown's the smartest basketball mind I've ever met. If you want to draw up a play to win a game, you want Larry Brown over Phil Jackson, who won 11 championships or whatever. No doubt about it. X's and O's, it's like graduate level versus, some rando at the CYO. But if you want the guy to manage personalities and keep everybody on the same page, you want Phil Jackson. And that's more important, to be honest. Keep a bunch of egos moving in the same direction to accomplish a team goal. That's a hell of a lot more difficult than drawing up a play, which anybody can do. Look it up on Google and just copy it.
Well, it's now yesterday's story, but that was my struggle with what was the ultimate trade of A.J. Brown from the perspective of his talent is top in the league. He's one of, or has been one of the best receivers in the league. His contributions to this football team from the time they picked him up are well documented, are well noted, and within that period of time when A.J. Brown was on the field, the Eagles won a Super Bowl. Howie Roseman said at a press conference one time, and maybe it was post last season, maybe it was just, maybe it was just feeding statements out into the universe, but, and I'm paraphrasing, it's too difficult in this league to let talent walk out the door. However he phrased it. A.J. Brown was a talent, is a talent. And now, and this is what I'm trying to tie this back into Nick, so I hope I'm making sense here, and if not, I apologize. But now, so Nick Sirianni failed in his ability to manage that one part of it. He has to do it again with another talented player in Jalen Carter, potentially. I know he doesn't get involved in the financials, but he's got to manage the locker room. And now he's got to put a product on the field, rely on a play caller, somebody else. Don't know. He may do a good job. He may not do a good job. Who knows? To be determined. But he's got to rely on that, send his offense into battle, and the offense is minus a talented player who had strong production, not replaced with a wide receiver room that can't match what he did, yet alone do more. And it puts your quarterback and your offense into what I think is this entire vulnerable position. And if that all plays out, and again, I realize it's a big if, but if all of that plays out, you're looking at potentially a completely new football team in 2027 if they don't accomplish success at the highest level. And getting the ability to reach that success determines on all those different variables that now appear to be fragments in the equation. And that's my struggle with it. Even in terms of Jalen, you just took away, I don't care whether they got along or not, you just took away one of his weapons, and you're now counting on, I guess, or expecting Mekhi Lemon to be Malik Neighbors in his first season. I don't know whether that's realistic or not. Maybe it is, but that's what you're doing.
Well, in the case of AJ, I mean, again, I go back to the Tomlin quote. Again, you want volunteers, not hostages. You saw what happened last year. The Eagles were tired of it. They didn't want to go through it again. Doesn't want to be here. You're not getting better. Nobody says you're getting better. It's addition by subtraction. Simply did not want to be here. And when somebody makes that decision in their minds, you know, and the Eagles tried to convince him over the weeks and months. You know, we're going to improve. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But he didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. So, you know, at some point, you say we had a hell of a run together. And the best case scenario for both sides is to move on. That's simply what it's about. It's not about anything else. It's not about getting better. It's about, you know, a relationship dying on the vine. And I think when you simplify it to that, I think it's more understandable. If you're saying you're not going to get better by amassing a Moneyball approach with Makai Lemon and Dontavian Wicks from an individual standpoint, you're not going to get better. But that doesn't mean you can't get better as a team. You know, as the Oakland A's did that year when they lost all those Moneyball players, they got better as a team. They didn't get better individually. They didn't get better talent-wise, but they got better as a team. That's possible. And that's the Eagles' goal. Whether they can turn the trick is to be determined, but it was about nothing more. It wasn't about trading a great player. It wasn't about replacing a great player. It wasn't about we think we can be better without this player from a talent standpoint. It was simply about, all right, this player doesn't want to be here. It's affecting things. You know, in his play, he had his worst season as an Eagle. It's affecting things from his standpoint. It's affecting things from the offensive standpoint. Nobody's happy. Why do you keep doing it? It's basically what it was.
Well, I remember the draft night of the trade. We were live with our draft show. And I remember when the announcement came on draft night that the Eagles were getting A.J. Brown. And if you look at the body of work, while A.J. was here, he was and is or part of the great success that the team had. Now, granted, so is Devontae Smith, but when you lose that piece, and I'm not trying to rehash the whole A.J. thing, I'm trying to determine where this football team is, because the other variable is, what are you going to do with Jalen Hurts if the team doesn't have this success this year? Is Saquon Barkley need to have a return to certainly not the year that he had the Super Bowl year in terms of yardage, but certainly needs to return to some sort of success on the field, more so than what he had last year, whether that's first down carries or whatever it is. So the ultimate end of the domino effect, back to the question, what's the end game? If all of this doesn't work and Jalen Carter is now the latest talented player to potentially be the next A.J. Brown scenario, because he wants the bag and Eagles don't want to give him the bag, and Drew Rosenhaus said, hey, you should be paid. If all of that festers, we're into a tailspin, John. Not me, not we. The team is into a tailspin, and lost in that vision is the end game, the end goal. To go deep into the playoffs and perhaps return to the Super Bowl. Now, maybe the Eagles have already written that off, and they're going through the motions to play. I'm not saying they're not playing to win, but there's perception and there's reality.
Well, that's the NFL. Welcome to the NFL. The Eagles have been through it before. Unhappy players. I mean, T.O. Much more acrimonious than A.J. Brown. they're not the first team to deal with a hold-in type scenario or a hold-out type scenario. They went through the whole thing, similar thing with Hassan Reddick a
but
few
isn't
years
this the
ago.
window, John? Isn't this the window? Aren't with the talent that the Eagles have, with what Vic Fangio has done on defense and how dominant the defense has been, with it individually, with the talent on paper that the Eagles have and have had, isn't this a real window of time to either strike or rebuild? One or the other. It's like the Sixers. We went from.
No, they're not the Sixers.
I'm not saying they're the Sixers, but we went from the process to the talent to the missed opportunity to find ultimate success to back to the process where the Sixers are today. And that talent that they have, they'll move on from, and they'll never get to that end. And so
anybody, even the Sixers, can get to the end. Sports are cyclical. So you go through these little pockets where the window's open, then the window closes. And you've seen it with the Eagles just in this era, going from Carson Wentz and his near MVP-like season and Nick Foles finishing in Super Bowl 52. And a couple of years later, Doug Peterson's out and they're rebuilding the whole thing and they go back to 2 more Super Bowls. Howie's already proven he can do that. Different coaches, different quarterbacks. The window's open. It's not as clearly as open as it once was. Now the Rams look better. The Seahawks look better on paper. The Eagles had typically looked like the best team on paper. That's probably not the case, but they're still one of the few teams who could say, we got a shot if things go right that we can go to the Super Bowl. There's probably 6, 7 teams that have that realistic approach. They're one of them still, but it's not as clear cut as it was the previous 2 seasons. But I mean, that's just sports. What's the end game? That's the problem. Like, I think the assumption is, again, well, they're close to the Super Bowl, so everybody's going to be on the same page. Look, individuals are individuals. On every Super Bowl team, on Super Bowl 52, you had guys who were selfish. Super Bowl 57, you had guys who were team-oriented, whatever word. The selfish might be a little bit hard, but this is a business. This is a business for these guys. They're looking to, again, very short shelf life to make a lot of money to take care of their family for maybe a generations. It's very important to them. Now, to the average man, it's more important to win a Super Bowl. They want to win a Super Bowl. They're all competitive. You don't get to this position to not be competitive. But to use AJ, look at AJ's comments after winning the Super Bowl. He was basically, he was told how he would feel. He was told what it's like. And he was like, this is it. All right, let's get back to work. Let's get back. And that's sort of the driven nature of superstar players. It's about the process. You hear that word all the time. It's about the process, because you're going to be in a position where you're not a Super Bowl contender because it is cyclical. And whenever that happens, if they move on from Jalen Hurts and they have to reboot the whole thing, they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender for a window of time. But you still got to go to work and you still got to get better. All the cliches, get 1% better. That's the process they're talking about. That's what, no matter how many times, and it frustrates me to no end when you have a new reporter who shows up to a press conference and they ask Nick Sirianni about something that's happening 4 weeks down the road, because I know what his answer is going to be. He's not thinking, you know the old question, Joe. You've been around long enough. It's, well, they're playing an AFC team this week, but Dallas is 2 weeks down the line. Are you thinking about Dallas? It's like, Nick will look at you like you got 3 heads. No, they're not thinking about Dallas. They're thinking about who's on the field that week. And people don't believe it. And I'm telling you, it's true. It's very, very hyper-focused about getting better each and every day. That's it. Win the day. Get 1% better. And if you do that, the rest of the stuff tends to fall in the line. You're a very good team. You're in a position to make a run. And that's where the Eagles have been. So this constant, and I realize we have to do it on this show. We do it on every show. Are they a Super Bowl contender? They're not thinking like that. They're thinking about getting better.
Well,
now, Howie's job is a little bit different.
Howie's thinking about that.
Well, Howie's job is a little bit different because he's got to think about the future and he's got to think about both. And like I said, people are upset with, like I said, when we talk about the uncharted stuff, you have to have difficult conversations that would piss off fans about players they love, like really, really difficult conversations. Like now everybody's talking about Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. Well, the Eagles got to have those conversations. Well, what if Jalen doesn't play well in this new offense? How are we going to get the next quarterback? Because it ain't easy to find a quarterback in the NFL. They have to have those conversations behind closed doors. They don't want it public. Joe Shane saw that happen when he was talking about moving on from Saquon Barkley. Like, oh, that's so unprofessional. That's not unprofessional. That's a fucking job. Excuse my language.
Yep.
He wouldn't be doing his job if he's not having those conversations. And by the way, he made the right decision for the New York Giants because they weren't prepared to take advantage of a player like Saquon Barkley. As you saw throughout his tenure in New York, they weren't in a position to take advantage. So why are you going to waste the money? He actually made the right decision for his franchise. Unfortunately for them, in their, Joe Shane, it's perceived a different way because he went to a division rival and they won the Super Bowl. But you think if they would have kept Saquon Barkley, you think the New York Giants would have won the Super Bowl in 2024? They were not winning the Super Bowl.
Neither were the Eagles.
No, but the Eagles were in a position. They had the other talent. So he came here and he was the final piece of the puzzle. Different scenarios. It was a great move for the Eagles. It would have been a terrible move for the Giants. And for whatever reason, people can't wrap their heads around that type of thing.
Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Sports Network. Shout out to everyone joining us today and to everyone in the chat. I promise I got to take my glasses off to be able to scan through some of the comments, and I will do that. This is a big weekend for Alexander James Krause, Zander Krause, and Emily DiMarino. Enjoy their wedding weekend on Saturday and then depart for 14 days on what'll be a great 2 weeks together. And then he'll return in time to fire up the engines, as by then we should know the reporting dates for camp towards the end of July. Johnny, sit tight just for 30 seconds, and then we'll come back. I want to fire a spot to for Fritz Bianculli. We are exclusively presented by Fritz Bianculli, a different kind of law firm for the seriously injured. Brian Fritz is an absolutely top player in the space, an unbelievable guy, a incredible supporter of Birds 365. We're back in 30 seconds.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
And back here on Birds 365, we're here till 10 o'clock, Monday through Friday. I'll be in the hot seat. Damn, so sad. The Zander we know will be gone. Bigger and better than ever, perhaps. But he is super excited about his day. Many of you in the chat have reached out to him. He loves it. And appreciates it a lot. I will tell you this on a personal note, as a pop, I'm super proud of the man he has become, of the way he runs the business. And I'm glad for him. And I'm certainly glad to welcome Emily in as my new daughter into the Krause family. It is Birds 365 with John McMullen. I'm Joe Krause in the hot seat today. No Birds 365 tomorrow. And then we will be right back here on Monday and continue on the consecutive streak of Birds 365 shows, John. Get a mulligan on tomorrow's miss. All right, so we'll give it.
Well, I missed one, so
I know you did. I know you did. But I kind of had already told Zander you can have a mulligan on that one too. I don't know how many mulligans you're allowed.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not Cal Ripken didn't get a mulligan, but I had a good run, so I'm not taking the mulligan. But I had a good run.
Johnny Mac, I wanted to have a conversation with you this morning. It was an interesting debate yesterday on the National Football Show with Dan Sileo, and Philly 500 was on, and Philly 500 was under siege and was being dominated or being pushed in a conversation. I don't want to say dominated. Philly 500 is very good at holding his position. He was being drilled by Dan Sileo on the statistical numbers of Jalen Hurts, zeroed in on his total number of passes over the middle. That was the conversation. And Dan did a great job. He went back and he pulled, the statistical numbers from each year, gave a cumulative total, showed Jalen's high percentage of completions. I think the total number may have been 99, but the percentage was very high on the number of passes that were completed by Jalen. But the number of passes thrown were far below what some of the other great quarterbacks do. I think Patrick Mahomes was at 1,500 plus passes over the middle. Jalen Hurts was at 99. So there was varying examples that Sills used. And I want to and I'm trying to follow this conversation. And I'm trying to inject into the convo. Well, and maybe I'm wrong on this, so you can correct me if you want, but who cares? If Jalen Hurts only threw 99 times over the middle, or whatever the number is, but the Eagles still amassed a body of work that was equivalent to 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Lombardi trophy, a couple of NFC East division crowns, and great success on the football field, who cares? Whether he throws the football over the middle or not, who cares? And that's what I kept coming back. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying when I look at it, if the ultimate goal of this great team game is to win, well, Jalen has done that. If the ultimate goal of a star quarterback is to lead your team to the Super Bowl, whether you were the star or the players on the team were the stars, he did that twice, dominated an Andy Reid team in the Super Bowl win that candidly was embarrassing in that first half. And listen, I'm a Spagnuolo, Andy Reid guy.
Now let's give the defense some credit for that.
Yeah, I give the defense credit. That's part of the team game analogy, but they put up a lot of points. They put up a lot of points in that game. The offense got out to a big lead. Then the defense went to work and shut Kansas City down. That's kind of, so back to my point. If Jalen Hurts delivers, but he doesn't deliver over the middle, who cares?
Well, the Eagles care. That's why they're changing the offense. The real debate is, has it gotten stagnant? Have people caught up to the offense? The Eagles' belief is the league has caught up to what they were doing, and they have to change. I kind of disagree with that, to be honest. I think that the biggest issue last year was the offensive line not being healthy. They won 11 games. I talk about it all the time. People act like they won 5 games. They won 11 games and went to the playoffs last year. And that's without Lane Johnson for half the season. That's without Cam Jurgens being a shell of himself, Landon Dickerson being even more of a shell of himself. And they still won 11 games. So if those two guys are healthy and Lane's out there for the full season, you're telling me they're not going to win 13 games? I don't think people caught up. I think they suffered through a season where guys were banged up. Now, they have better medical records than we have, back to the uncharted talk. They may know the long-term history of Landon Dickerson is not good. Cam Jurgens seems better this season, but we'll see. Lane can't play forever, but hopefully he can play this season and play 17 games. And all of a sudden, if those guys are healthy and playing at a high level, the offense is going to be better. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care who the receivers are. I don't care if Jalen Hurts is thrown over the middle or outside the numbers. It's going to be better. So there's a fundamental, but to your point of who cares? Well, the Eagles care. They're changing because they think they need to change. And the second part is a business aspect. We've talked about contracts. You got to talk about Jalen Hurts' contract. Because he's out, this is his last year of guaranteed money. Fully guaranteed money. He's got $22 million next year of guaranteed money. Well, he ain't playing for $22 million next year. So something has to be done. The question is, the cost of doing business in the NFL at the quarterback position for a player that has performed at Jalen Hurts' level, he's at $51 million right now per season. When he signed that contract, he was the highest paid player in football, in the history of football, for about 10 days. Now he is behind I'm counting them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different quarterbacks. That's the way of the world. So that 51 is going to turn into 55, maybe 60. And do you want to pay that kind of money for that kind of performance moving forward? That's the question. Or do you want to reboot the thing and get a cost effective? Do you have confidence in drafting a quarterback? And then maybe you can go out and team Max Crosby with Jonathan Grenard or a Max Crosby type player. And you don't have to worry about cutting somebody else or trading somebody else. That's the juggling act that Howie has to perform. Now, Patrick Mahomes just signed an extension on his deal. Now he's up to $64 million a year, so he's the top of the food chain. That impacts your ability to build the rest of the roster. You have 12 quarterbacks who make over $50 million a year now. Jalen Hurts, by the way, is the only one of them besides Patrick Mahomes who won a Super Bowl. Now, Matthew Stafford. I caught myself. So there's 3. It's not easy. It's not easy to build your team that way. And it keeps going up and up and up. Whereas look at Sam Darnold last year.
Well, he's not one of the top. He's not one of the top 11. That's for sure.
Well, that's my point. They won $33 million he made last year. Significant, but a lot different.
Well, that's.
Do you want to go to bridge route? We've talked about Mac Jones. If you really want to play this offense, he's going to be a free agent next year. Go pay him $25 million to run this offense.
Well, is it fair to at least, if it's not fair to say, is it fair to at least speculate that the Eagles have already had those conversations about what's happening with Jalen Hurts, and they've perhaps already made the decision that they're going to move on from Jalen Hurts? I mean, why? I mean, if you
they don't want to move on from Jalen Hurts. The best case scenario is he plays extremely well in this offense, and they go back to the Super Bowl and everything's great. And then you extend them at $60 million a year and you run it back. That's the hope. But again, you have to have the rainy day conversations. What if it doesn't work? They've had those conversations. It's one of the reasons Howie wanted the first round pick so bad for A.J. Brown, and he was willing to go out years to get it. Because if you do have to draft a quarterback, you better find a way to get in the top 10. Those are the rainy day conversations. He's already preparing for that. That's the brilliance of Howie Roseman. It's the contingencies. Like most people want to put the blindfold on and, put the earphones on and say, no, I don't want to talk. I don't want to have difficult conversations. The job of a GM is to prepare for the rainy day. But you don't want the rainy day. You want clear skies. So you're rowing in both situations. Your job is enormous. It's you gotta maximize what you have right now, and then you got to prepare if things go poorly. And that is really difficult to do. and nobody does it better than Howie. So
Well,
yes, they've had those conversations, but no, they would never go into a season actively rooting for the quarterback to fail because we're going to move on. Because I've heard people say that. It's not how they operate. It's just not how they do. But now there's some teams, Sixers, did it for years. They're purposely trying to lose. The Eagles don't do that. And certainly not now with the talent they do have on the team. They're trying to win, but they're also realistic about it. And that's why they haven't extended him this offseason. Look, if they went back to the Super Bowl last season, they would have extended him by now. There's no question. But he didn't have a good season. They're changing the offense. They want to see what it looks like. And then you make the decision after this season. And they will. It could be trading him and moving on, or it could be a $60 million extension, depending on how he plays this season.
Well, what's Jalen's? That's the team's move. What's Jalen's move? If the Eagles don't, or obviously they have not given him the extension, if he's playing in the final year of what is, guaranteed money, even though you said there's $22 million that's left, it's still guaranteed. What is he saying? What is Jalen Hurts saying? I mean, what is he supposed to do, or what is he planning for? What's Jalen Hurts' contingency plan? Because if I'm Jalen, and everybody knows I'm a Jalen Hurts fan, Dan Sileo calls me a Jalenite. But if I'm Jalen Hurts, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Forget about my numbers. Here's what we've done. Here's what I've delivered for the big contract that you gave me. Here's what the expectation of the team going into this season. Here's the weapons. Give me the extension. Give me the extension. And if you're not willing to give it to me, why not? Like, what else is left to prove other than being one of those 7 or 8 other big, great quarterbacks that throw for a lot of yards and a lot of completions and throw the football over the middle and do all that shit, but don't win a Super Bowl? The body of work, John, I remember following your reports from training camp through the season, through Jalen becoming the starter, to this incredible run of victories by Jalen Hurts, to this total dominance by the offense, to this ability in the Super Bowl year to get the early lead, put together the long sustaining drive, never give the opponent an opportunity to even get back into the game, and all of that process or body of work, Jalen Hurts was a part of. He's a part of what has been the era of.
Well, I would say people have to evolve the quarterback conversation, because look, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, the quarterback won a Super Bowl, he's been to 2 Super Bowls, and act like he's the most important player on a team. That's fair to say. good, bad, or indifferent. The quarterback is the most important player. But I mean, we just talked about Saquon Barkley and his impact on the Super Bowl. We just talked about the defense. The defense took an Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes team and didn't allow them to cross midfield until 2 minutes or what was left in the third quarter. At the time, I said that is the best defensive performance in the history of the Super Bowl, period. Stop. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and you don't let him cross midfield. Point being, there's other people involved. So you can't have it both ways. The reality of the situation, and you have to have difficult conversations, is with all this talent, this team has had a below average passing game for 2+ seasons. Minimum. You could argue 3. These are the difficult conversations you have to have. People talk about the Super Bowl and the explosion in the actual Super Bowl game and the NFC Championship game. Well, look at the games during the season. There were 6 or 7 where it's under 200 passing yards. This has been a long-standing issue.
What was Jalen Hurts' stat line when they won the Super Bowl?
But again, why is that? And again, if you look at most of that damage was done after the game was over. And that's why I bring up the defense's performance. They literally blitzkrieged them and the game was over.
Well,
and then they started coming up with daggers down the field and everybody gets excited from it. The strength of that team was the defense. They had the number 1 defense in the NFL.
Yeah, but that doesn't minimize. They're supposed to. That's how you build a winning team. That doesn't minimize or take away from the offense. Doesn't minimize it doesn't take away from the team's performance all the way through the season to get up there. The bottom line is to win, right? Isn't that the bottom line? Whether in the ultimate team game, hey, we got to win.
Yeah, but to continue to win, that's the job of you're trying to improve. You're always trying to get better. You have to be honest with yourself on how you did win and how you are winning. And I kind of disagree with the Eagles. Like I said, they think people caught up to their offense. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But again, Jalen Hurts has had a lot of tremendous passing games. So you can pick and choose whether you want to pick, the Super Bowl, you want to pick Pittsburgh during the regular season that year, which was his best game. But they want to forget about Carolina. They want to forget about 114 yards against the New York Giants. They want to forget a 4-game stretch where he didn't get over 200 yards. They want to forget about 118 yards in Baltimore. They want to forget about 108 yards against Carolina, the famous, what's the problem? A.J. saying passing, which, by the way, in the same locker room, Devontae Smith, the same day after the game, said the same thing. Jordan Mailata said the same thing. Jalen Hurts, to his credit, on the podium, said the same thing. But A.J. said it in a way where people took the baton and resonated. Passing. What's the problem? Passing. It's been a problem.
Passing or play calling or play design.
It's been a problem for 2 years. It was a problem when Kellen Moore was here. And they won the Super Bowl because the running back ran for 2,000 yards and set a new NFL record when you count the postseason, over 2,500 yards.
Well, that's what he's supposed to do. The running back is supposed to contribute.
The running back is supposed to set the all-time NFL record, because that's not going to be sustainable.
No, that I get, but the running back is supposed to contribute to the success.
Right, he did more than contribute.
He did. And on any given Sunday or any given day or any given season, somebody on that talented team of 53.
But the point is, if you're Howie Roseman and you see 183, 158, 114, 118, 108.
Is it win or loss?
If you're Howie Roseman and you see that, and you say to yourself, do we want to pay $60 million for that? And last season, 152, 101, 130, 179, 183, 135, 175, 185, 110. Do you want to pay $60 million for that?
Yeah, but John, finish the sentence. Is it a W or an L on those games? Which is it? Jalen's not the only guy in the field. I mean, so if that's what it is, and that,
okay.
I mean,
is A.J. Brown great?
A.J. Brown is a top receiver. Yes, I think.
Devontae Smith great?
I think he is.
Is Dallas Goedert great?
When he's on the field, I think he is.
Is Saquon Barkley great?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the issue?
Well, that's my point. If Saquon Barkley has a great game and Jalen has a shit game,
is Kellen Moore great?
If it results in a W, that's the end game.
Joe, you don't want to have the difficult conversation. These are the conversations that people don't like.
No,
when Howie is behind closed doors, they're having these conversations, and people don't like them.
John, it's not that. I'm trying to understand what's the difference in the outcome. If Jalen Hurts throws for 300 yards instead of 148, what's the difference?
It's not. Is
it an L? That's what I'm trying to get to.
It's not about 300 versus 148. It's about consistently being underwater in the passing game for 2+ seasons with the talent that they have assembled.
But
which they think, which by the way,
what though, John?
Which by the way, I think they've overrated to a certain. I think the fan base overrates, because when you lay it out like that, they say, well, Saquon's great. Well, AJ's great. Well, Devontae's great. Well, Dallas is great. The offensive line is great. Everything's great. Which, by the way, I think they overrated to a certain extent. At one point, it was great, but this league moves quickly, and people start to descend, and things happen. Again, you can't have it both ways. Now, what the Eagles are having that discussion is like, we got to get better. We got to get better in the passing game. Well, how do we get better? Well, they've assumed that we got to go to this Kyle Shanahan. We got to set up the wide zone to make the running game better. We got to use more motion. We got to be under center more. We got to do this. We got to do that. But the passing game's got to get better. These are the difficult conversations. They've already made the decision. I would have stuck with the status quo, ironically, because they win ugly. Who cares? I'm with you. They win. I'm actually with you. They win ugly. It's not about aesthetics to me. That's the goal. By hook or by crook, get across the finish line. They're the ones who are telling you by their actions that their passing game is not good enough and it needs to improve. And the bottom line is, if it continues at a similar level this year, they do not want to pay $60 million on an extension for that level of production. That's the bottom line.
John, is there a stat in the league run or pass on first down, where teams on any given first down, 1st and 10, a team's going to run the ball 62% of the time and pass it 38. Is there
the Eagles are a heavy run team and have been for really during the whole Jalen Hurts era.
So on first down, they're running the ball.
Yeah, and it's they had a very bad year on first downs last year. I talk about it all the time. In fact, that's their whole goal, is to fix first down, and the rest takes care of itself if you fix first down, because then you're in second, third, manageable, and things become easy. Where if you're 1st and 12, 2nd and 12, or 3rd and 13, obviously you become one-dimensional, predictable. Everybody knows you have to throw the ball, and it becomes much more difficult. It becomes advantage defense. They were terrible, and that explains, if you want to boil last year's struggles into one thing, it would be the ineffectiveness and the negative plays on first down. And that's what they're trying to fix with the wide zone. And I think it's more about the running game, ironically, than the passing game. Their goal with the passing game is to make it easier, because it's 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 5 versus 3rd and long, and then it'll take care of itself. That is the goal of what they're doing on offense. Howie's got a much broader decision to make. They're going to try to win games. You know, this is for, you made a comment earlier, you're right, about when you're talking about Nick Sirianni. He's got different constituencies. He's got to make Jeffrey Lurie happy. He's got to make the fans happy. He's got to make the players happy, blah, blah, blah. He's got different constituencies. For the public facing part of it, you talk about the new offense and innovating and evolution and all that kind of stuff. Inside, when the games start, they're going to go try to win the game. And he says it all the time. If that means running it 40 times, we'll run it 40 times. If that means pass it 40 times, we'll pass it 40 times. He's going to try to win the freaking game. He's going to try to knock down the pin that's in front of him. And that's what he should do. But again, you got to play the public relations game as well. So the irony is that I'm with you. I don't think it's about aesthetic play. I think it's about winning, and nobody's won at a higher level than the Eagles over the Nick Sirianni era, with the exception of the Chiefs and maybe the Bills, a couple teams. I'm with you. But where I dissect is the people that don't understand why the Eagles are asking these internal questions. Like, they want to get better in the passing game. I have no problem with that. Continue to try to evolve, try to get better, as long as you scale it back when the games start. I don't want to throw the ball just to throw the ball. I don't want to throw the ball over the middle just to throw the ball over the middle. I want to go win a game. So do all this bullshit in the offseason, evolve and less stagnation and make everybody happy, but then scale it back to what your players do best. Now, Howie's got a bigger decision because, again, the money comes into it. It's a business. And you have a certain amount of assets that you have to allocate. And because of the cost of doing business at the quarterback position, you have to make a serious decision on whether you want to continue paying this type of money for this level of production. It's a different conversation. Can you build it up a different way? Is it easier to build it up a different way? Trying to serve two masters.
And what's the timeline to be able to get back into the conversation that we're actually in the middle of right now. If Jalen Hurts, if the backroom conversations have already resulted in the belief that the Philadelphia Eagles are not willing to give Jalen Hurts $60 million, or whatever it is, whatever the math is, and this is it, and we're going to then find a quarterback in the draft or the supplemental draft or whatever the case may be. The process of getting back into the conversation that we're having now, that window of success, that window that has produced 50 some wins or whatever it is versus 20 some losses, whatever the actual numbers are, that window that has produced a Super Bowl win, that window that has produced a trip to the Super Bowl and a loss, that window that has produced conference championships, kind of like the Donovan McNabb era, that window of McNabb and that greatness that couldn't finish it. What's next? What's the window of time, or what's the tenure of time to get back to the window? That's what I don't understand.
Well, you already just went through it with Doug and Carson to Jalen and Nick. I mean, Howie's got a lot of confidence in his ability to build this thing back up because he's done it. And he did it in a very short period.
Well, what?
The other part is, the assumption again that things are in a stasis. And they don't move. So, to the Jalenites who point to the winning record and assume, well, that's going to continue as he gets older. He's, going to turn 28 in August. So if you re-up him, he's under contract through 2028 already. So what happens with these big quarterback contracts is you reboot the money and you throw 2 more years on the end with the void years with the Eagles, something like that. So, for practical purposes, you'd be moving out to 2030, maybe 2031. And then all of a sudden you're talking about, a 31, 32-year-old quarterback who doesn't run as much, doesn't use his dual threat ability already. That started. And you're still got to pay him like he's, this is, I say it all the time. This league moves quickly. And you've already seen it with Jalen. Whoever it is, whether Jalen doesn't want to run as much, whether the Eagles told him not to run as much, the real answer, a combination of both, because you want to protect that $60 million investment, now $50 million. You want to protect it. Life moves quickly. It moves even quicker in the NFL. Look at Russell Wilson. Look at how quickly he dropped off a table. The quarterback that Jalen is often compared to. Look at how quickly it happened to him. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Jalen Hurts, but you have to put that in the equation. If you were talking about Russell Wilson after his second Super Bowl in a row, no doubt about it, Hall of Fame trajectory. Now you talk about Russell Wilson today, and he's a long shot to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Because he hung on and he started playing poorly. And so his last great season was 2020, where he was on the Seahawks. He was 12-4. The Seahawks were, completed almost 70% of his passes, 40 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. He had 513 on the ground, all pro level season. The next year, he won 6 games as a starter, then 4, then 7, then 6. He literally went from the penthouse to the outhouse in one off season, from being an all-pro starter to a below-average starter. And since that season, when he was the ultimate winner, the comparisons are eerie, because he would just win games at a high clip. And that's what people would say. Well, he's a winner. He's a winner. 6-8, 4-11, 7-8, 6-5.
Well, that wasn't all Russell Wilson either.
No, but no, it never is. But that's how people talk. Wins and losses aren't a quarterback stat. But the point is, because you look like the ultimate winner, this league humbles everybody, with the exception of Tom Brady, who broke quarterback evaluation. He's the one guy who sort of pushed back on that. This league humbles everybody eventually. But I just bring up Russell Wilson because people compare the skill sets, they compare the Super Bowls, they compare the winning, and then he fell off the table. Same guy. It happens to everybody. It's going to happen. So the assumption that, well, Jalen did this in 2022 has nothing to do with 2026 or 2027. You know, that's why you have to have the difficult conversations and say, you know, your goal from the business end, from the Eagles end, is not to pay for past performance, although you often do that because that's the nature of it. You want to pay for future performance, and that's projection. And $60 million is a lot of money. So you better feel good about your projection.
Well, what do you get for $60 million? What do you get? If you're right,
I told this to Zander. I told this to Zander yesterday on the show. Interestingly enough, Patrick Mahomes got his massive extension. Right now, he's under contract. I don't know. I don't even know. It's so far out. So we're talking about Patrick Mahomes. 2033 is under contract before the void years start. Now, obviously, they're going to redo his deal a million times in between then, but the point is, if we just use average annual values, up to $64 million. This is Patrick Mahomes. No doubt about it, first ballot Hall of Famer. I wouldn't pay him $64 million. How the hell am I going to build my roster? So I'm probably not the best person, because I don't think any of the there is 12 quarterbacks who are over 50 million. I wouldn't pay any of them. Any of them. Any of them. Dak Prescott, I'm not paying Dak Prescott $60 million. I think Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, which is rare, is the best quarterback in football, at least from a processing, from a technique, from a standpoint. I think he's the best quarterback in football. He makes 55. I wouldn't pay him 55. Josh Allen, 55. I wouldn't pay him 55. Jordan Love, 50. You got to be kidding me. Trevor Lawrence, 55. You got to be kidding me.
Oh, what's the Mendoza line for quarterbacks in the NFL?
The big drop off is after Daniel Jones. It goes 44. Daniel Jones, I'm not paying him $44 million, to Sam Darnold at 33.5. That's sort of the first drop off. And they won a Super Bowl paying him that. And then there's a drop off. Baker Mayfield makes 33.3. And then there's a drop off to Malik Willis at 22.5. And then it goes way down to the young quarterbacks or the guys who are, just holding on. So yeah, I mean, those are the $50 million quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the structure of the QB position. Right?
Yeah, I think it's gotten to the point. It is. It's the cost of doing business. But I think my personal opinion is it's gotten to the point where it's easier to build with a Sam Darnold type than it is with a $50, $60 million quarterback. Not that he's better, which I think people don't understand. And that's why I bring up Mac Jones. He's going to be a free agent next year, and you're going to run this offense, and he's in this offense. And when he's played, he's been very successful since he got out to San Francisco. You probably get him for 25, 30 million.
Well, except if in the formula Mannion is a head coach next year. Right. I mean, you know what I mean?
If he's ahead, the only way Sean Mannion's a head coach next year is the Eagles have tremendous success, and then they're paying Jalen Hurts $60 million anyway.
Well,
that's the only way. The only way.
What's tremendous success?
Win a Super Bowl, or at least go to the Super Bowl. It's the only way Sean Mannion's going to be a head coach.
And if they don't accomplish that, Mannion is back here as the OC.
Yeah, I don't think the guy's got 2 years of coaching experience.
I don't know. At one point last year, and maybe I'm wrong on this, I thought I remember Patullo being categorized as a hot potential.
Yeah, that's Tom. That's Tom's list. Tom Pelissero, who's very plugged in. Yeah, he was on some head coaching. Listen, I'll let you in on a little secret. How do you do that? You look at the good teams and you look at their coordinators. That's who people hire. So that's easy to pinpoint.
Well, then that's why I would say Mannion. If the Eagles if the Eagles are a good team in 2026, and by good, they win the division, they get into the playoffs, they maybe win a playoff game. Who knows? Something in that line, something similar to what the body of work has been the last 5 years. If that's the case, then Mannion's going to get a head coaching job anyway. And the narrative of Jalen having another offensive coordinator comes up anyway. So then I asked the question, well, why would the Eagles throw the baby out with the bathwater, put an offense, change direction on the offense based on what Mannion wants to do, and force your $52 million quarterback to adapt to a new offense that's going to be a one-year deal?
Well, it's not going to be a one-year deal. I mean, you just, in that case scenario, and it's the nature of the NFL. If the Eagles went back to the Super Bowl last year, Kevin Patullo would be a head coach. I mean, there's a million teams running this style of offense. That's my problem with it. You're being a copycat. You just go get Clay Kubiak. You get the next guy. They all run the same scheme. The irony of this is, people think it's new in Philadelphia and think it's innovative. Everybody copies the scheme. Green Bay, San Francisco, Los Angeles are the most successful. Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. There's 12 or 13 teams that run the Shanahan scheme. You just get the next guy. You know, who's Kyle Shanahan's offensive coordinator? Who's Matt LaFleur's offensive coordinator? Who's Kevin O'Connell's offensive coordinator? Who's Sean McVay? Nate Shieldhouse, the Eagles. He just got
making a $50 million investment or a $60 million investment in Jalen Hurts, or not if I'm going to. If Jalen Hurts is under contract right now, and I'm running the team, which I'm not, and I'm not qualified to do it, so let me preface the statement with that. But if I'm running it, or I'm running a business, and my top performer is getting a big bag of money or a high percentage of the available dollars for the position, then my obligation or my responsibility to the number one player is to make sure that I provide the assets or the support or whatever is needed for that number one player to do what he does best. However that is defined. And I just don't see it being that simple of turn and burn either a coordinator or a quarterback and expect the team within a 4 or 5 year period, or if it is a 4-year period, to rebuild back up to where you already are. That's what I struggle with, John. Where is the desire to stay at a level that you've accomplished and then feed the beast to stay at that level instead of making all different types of changes and scenarios that ultimately force you down the ladder to crawl back up to get to that level again?
I mean, I think there's 19. I mean, people have to come to grips with continuity in that there's 19 new offensive coordinators, I think, this year. There's 32 teams. There's 19 new offensive coordinators. That we live in a microwave, non-patient society. You know, look at the Eagles. The Eagles have had success with constant turnover. You know, they're successful. Shane gets a head coaching job. They're unsuccessful. Brian gets fired. They're successful. Kellen gets a head coaching job. They're unsuccessful. Kevin gets fired. And by the way, I put that in quotes because they still won 11 games and made the playoffs. In Brian Johnson's era, they had the worst defense in the NFL by the end of the season. In Kevin Patullo's era, we just lived through it. We know what happened. That's been the nature of it. They didn't have to fire Brian Johnson. They chose to fire Brian Johnson. They didn't have to fire Kevin Patullo. They chose to be the torch and pitchfork crowd. They scapegoated them because there were other issues. That's the nature of the NFL. And it's even heightened when you have great expectations, as the Eagles do. Look at the quarterback coach position. Same turnover. Scott Leffler leaves. Jalen Hurts is working out with him at Temple. They fired him. Here comes Sparks Frazier. You know, Alex Tanney. Alex Tanney shouldn't have got fired. Go all the way back to Press Taylor. Press Taylor's now the offensive coordinator in Chicago with Ben Johnson, the greatest offensive mind in the history of the world.
Yeah, right. Right.
Everybody thinks he's an
By the way,
idiot
that's
here.
gonna be a tough Monday night game in Chicago. Thank God it's early, right?
Everybody thinks he's an idiot here, Press Taylor, but Ben Johnson thinks he's really, really good. You know, and to Jalen's credit, by the way, Jalen has never used that excuse. You know, he has said he would like to have some continuity, but he hasn't had that, and he's not going to use it as an excuse. But you can't. The nature of the game, if you're successful, you're going to lose coaches. If you're unsuccessful in Philadelphia, and Howie has talked about this, you're going to lose coaches. There's no way to stop it. it's an ugly cycle because nobody has any patience. So either Sean is going to be successful and he's going to be a head coach, or he's going to be unsuccessful. He might, because he's so young, there might be a little bit of a window for some patience, but it's going to be ugly along the way. But I could see people saying, well, he had growing pains and let's give him a second chance. I could see that. But history says they're going to turn on him pretty quickly. But the overall point, Joe, if there's one offense, you don't have to worry about finding the next coordinator. It's this offense because everybody runs this offense. So you just go get the next guy.
Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Sports Network, along with John McMullen. I'm Joe Krause in for Zander Krause. Thank you for all of your comments in the chat and for being with us here today. Again, no Birds 365 tomorrow. So in essence, this is our Football Friday as we go into the big wedding weekend for Alexander Krause and Emily DiMarino getting married on Saturday of this week. And then Zander will be out for 2 weeks, 14 days as he travels with his new bride. I'll be sitting in the hot seat with John McMullen as we start to zero in and get ready for, I guess, I don't know how many weeks we're out, but the start of camp in July. And then I guess that's when it all gets real leading into the 2026 season of the unknown. John, is that a fair way to say it? Hold that answer, John. I got to pause for 15 seconds. By the way, I'm not going to be able to hit the head in 15 seconds. We went longer. I missed my bathroom break, but I got to pause for 15 seconds as I think about Zander getting married this weekend. Popped into my mind, of course, about one of our other good partners. You see it on the board there on the overlay. Wildwoods down at the beach. If you are planning to go down to the Wildwoods, if you're interested in going down to the Wildwoods for the summer or even the fall, the Wildwood season extends all the way now into November. And it is a great trip. A shout out to Wildwoods for being a big sponsor again on Birds 365. They've returned now this year for what is year 7. You see the Wildwoods backdrop behind John McMullen. We'll pause for 15 seconds. We're coming right back with the rest of the show on Birds 365.
Welcome to the Jet Setters and the High Rollers, to the Thrill Seekers and the Night Owls. Welcome to everything you could possibly want on one 5-mile island. Welcome to the Wildwoods. Book your stay today.
And back here on Bird 365, exclusively presented also by Fritz Bianculli, a different kind of law firm for the seriously injured. Good chatter, good conversation today with Johnny Mack. Don't forget the National Football Show with Dan Cilio today. I believe it is an abbreviated version of the National Football Show as we plan on this end from a family side to begin everything and all of the celebration with Zander and Emily and their big wedding weekend. John, let's spend the last 20 minutes or so, less than that, I guess it is. Maybe it's more. I'm not sure. My math isn't great on that, but is there anything left in terms of Eagles moves that you anticipate or expect? I know, and maybe it's too broad of a question. I know Howie's always looking. He's always,
there's always churn at the back end,
right? What's the latest churn, or what are they looking to fill or find? Or perhaps are they content with what's there, and they kind of already are focused in on, okay, what's the final 53 going to look like?
No, they're never They're no the UFL, the spring league just ended. So you saw a little bit of news around the league about UFL players signing, and the Eagles signed 2 of them. Eric Ikukanma, who's a wide receiver, and Sean Wade, who's a cornerback that people may remember because he was a pretty high-profile player at Ohio State. So they signed 2 players this week. So that kind of talks about the churn on the back end. But for the more relevant 53 man, yeah, they still have the opening at safety in theory. That could be something that happens over the summer. Howie's kind of famous for making player for player trades during training camp. That might be that type of situation. And the Crosby stuff ramped up because a reporter out there indicated the interest of the Eagles and the 49ers. The 49ers is very true. I know that for a fact. I don't know how the Eagles would fit him at this stage unless they're going to make other major moves. Now, Howie's not adverse to making a splash, and that would certainly be a splash. And look, when you talk about the uncertainty of this team, it is more uncertain than it has been in the previous couple of years. When you knew they were going to be a good team, it was just a matter of how good. Now there's a little bit more uncertainty. It's pretty clear that the Rams are the favorite on paper. The Seahawks are still significant on paper. And then you probably start talking about the Eagles, which is a little bit of a downtick. I still think they have a high floor as a team because of the defense. The defense is not going to let them lose a lot of games. So almost all the uncertainty comes on offense, which I talked about it. I mean, it wasn't pretty this spring, but it didn't have to be pretty because they're not playing in June. And they are installing a new offense, and guys are uncertain out there and still learning, and they're still installing. But the defense is ready to go. And I think year 3 of Vic Fangio, his history, if you look at it, particularly in San Francisco and Chicago, when he really became the best defensive coordinator in football, look at his year 3s. Really impressive because he gets more comfortable with the players he has. He trusts them more. And now you have a core group that he's had here for a while. And you add Reek Woolen and you add Jahad Campbell playing full-time at linebacker. And you add Jonathan Grenard as a big-time pass rusher. This defense is going to be really good. It's just a matter of how good. And that's why the floor of this team is very high, because you're going to be in every game because of that defense.
Yeah, the defense is not the Achilles heel with or without Jalen Carter. And they're going to have Jalen Carter unless for some reason he's not going to hold out.
No,
right?
no, he's not going to not play. So he's going to be out there. Yeah, I mean, they're just loaded. The one weakness is safety, but you can't have everything. Everybody's got some holes. And yeah, I mean, they're going to be good on defense. It's just a matter of, you never can say they're going to be number 1 like they were in 2024 when they won the Super Bowl. They had the top ranked defense in the NFL, but I'll say this group is more talented than that group.
Than the 24 group?
Yeah. 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 I mean, those corners are like unbelievable. Quinyon Mitchell doesn't give up receptions in practice.
Yeah.
Cooper DeJean is one of the best slot cornerbacks I've ever seen. And then you bring Reek Woolen into the mix, who looked phenomenal in the spring. Obviously he's had some issues, focus, tackling. He's got to do it consistently, but the talent level is off the charts. And then, like I said, I love Nakobe Dean. Everybody loves Nakobe Dean. But if you're talking about pure talent, Jihad Campbell is just a step above. Zach Bond's a Pro Bowl, all-pro level player. Jordan Davis has turned the corner. Moro Jomo's a great pass rusher. Jonathan Grenard is, I said all the time, when the Eagles fans see Jonathan Grenard for the first time, they're going to fall in love. He's just always in the backfield. Always. Tremendous explosion. Jalix Hunt is getting better and better. Yeah, this is the most talented defense they've had in a long time.
It's probably unfair because of the limited snaps that he's been able to, or the body of work that he's been able to put onto the field. How critical is Makuba?
Very. I mean, and he's, going to be better in year 2. But, safety is the one position where you could use an upgrade. And that might be the trade over the summer that Howie's looking to make. But if not, you can persevere with Makuba and Marcus Epps or Michael Carter, especially when you're getting tremendous front 7 play and cornerbacks are going to shut people down. It's a lot easier to mask any deficiency on the back end.
The Eagles were ranked last year defensively, John, what?
I think 9th or 10th. Right. They were top 10. I think it was 9 or 10.
And right now you anticipate.
Yeah, they're going to be better than that. Now, you can never say 1, like I said, but because a lot of things have to go right. But they're more gifted player for player than they were in 2024. Because now they have the second corner. You think about 2024, Quinyon was a rookie, so he's much better. Slay was great, but he was aging. And now you have Woolen, who's and Isaiah Rodgers was a big part of it. Now they have Jonathan Jones, who's going to be the third corner, who's a longtime starter. So they have depth, just like they did in 2024. In the front, Grenard's the best pass rusher they've had since Reddick, edge rusher. Yeah, they're just better, and he's a better all-around player than Reddick was, or is. This group is the best group they've had in the Sirianni era or the Fangio era.
And by the way, Sirianni doesn't get involved in the defense at all.
Well, he doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, you have the best defensive mind in the game. If you're smart, you delegate, and Nick's smart, and Vic doesn't need help. But when Sean Desai was here, he acted like a head coach, and he tried to give him help. But when you hire Vic Fangio, you just let him do his job.
John, what's the last thing before as we come up to the close of the show here on Birds 365? What is the patience level for the organization on the chance that the offense is going to struggle in the first handful of games, first 5-6 games. And by struggle, I mean struggle. They can't get into a rhythm. They don't dominate on first down. There's just a learning curve that extends from camp into the first part of the season. What's the patience level before they abort?
It's a good question. They,
Turn this off too. I don't know what the hell
2024 is the best example because they were changing offenses with Kellen Moore and they aborted after 4 games. The difference this time is they committed to it more. They really want to play this style of offense. So I think it'll be a little bit longer. They also, part of it was just circumstance. They happened to have an early bye that year, so they could take a week off and say, this isn't working. They don't have that. So they're gonna try to play this style of offense. But, I think even Sean, when he spoke to us, Sean Mannion admitted it's going to be a blended approach. People think it's going to be this, but we're going to take advantage of what the quarterback does well. And if he's a good coach and everybody thinks he is and says he is, that's what he will do. So I think they're going to stick with it from at least the public's eyes for a long time and live with the consequences. Is that the right decision? It's not the decision I would have made, but I'll say this. If Blaine Johnson is healthy, if Cam Jurgens is healthy, Landon Dickerson is as healthy as he can be, they're going to be fine.
What would be the Achilles heel on the offense, John?
Injuries on the offense, the same as last year. Injuries on the offensive line. Then they're in trouble. They're in deep trouble because they're not going to be able to just throw the ball all over the field. They need the running game, and they need to fix first down, and they need to help the passing game by making third down more manageable.
Will Barkley and Bigsby be more of a 1-2 punch in this offense, or
no? I think the opposite.
The opposite.
I think this is a big Saquon season. I've said it for a long time now. This is, in a lot of ways that, this might be Saquon's last season with the Eagles. So a lot of it is the ugly, untoward part of this game is, running backs have a short shelf life, and his shelf life might be about to expire after this season. And the Eagles kind of know that. Next year he's only got $2.5 million of guaranteed money. I think they're going to run him until the wheels fall off, so to speak.
The business side of the National Football League, the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl or bust. If it's bust, if it's bust, it's a completely different roster of players and stars in 27 versus if it is a Super Bowl win or a deep into the playoff run that perhaps leads to getting into the Super Bowl, whether you win or not, I guess maybe it's a different conversation. It is a complete opposite for Jalen, for Saquon, for Lane, for Goddard.
Yeah, you might have a lot of turnover on the offensive side next year. A lot of turnover.
I mean, it appears that there's going to be a lot of turnover right now, John. Those backroom conversations that are not public to us might already be done on the whiteboard.
Well, I don't believe that, but I mean, there's a realism to it. You know, Lane might retire. Dallas probably going to move on. That's why you dropped Eli Stowers so early. Landon, they knocked off a year off his deal, so they know, look, health-wise, he's not going to be able to go many more years. Saquon, with his tread off the tire and his cost at that position, could be likely to move on. You've already moved on from A.J., so the true stars are coming to the end of their lifespan in Philadelphia.
All right, Johnny Mac, good stuff today, man, on Birds 365. Shout out to JAKIB Nation and all of your comments today. I know Zander was getting a lot of well wishes as well from everyone. Big weekend here for Alexander, James Krause, and Emily DiMarino. And we end our broadcast today here on Birds 365 with one more big salute to Zander Krause, who now transitions into the new phase of his life with a great bride, Emily. Good stuff, and big congrats to him. And thanks so much for all of the support from JAKIB Nation. All of the well wishes have been, candidly, they've been overwhelming for him. And I'll say it on his behalf because he'll never say it. I appreciate it so much, and so does he.
Yeah, and another A.J. is leaving, but he will be back after 2 weeks in Italy. So.
He will return. We will be right back here with Birds 365 on Monday. Don't forget, no Birds 365 tomorrow, and don't forget the National Football Show today with Dan Cilio coming your way right here on the JAKIB Sports Network. For John McMullen and his great insight, thank you, Johnny Mac. And for everyone here as part of JAKIB Nation, I'm Joe Krause. See you next time, everyone.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.